session.
Do we want to call the work session into the informal session into order, Jill, or?
Yes.
You want to call everything into order and then do the, okay.
Yep.
The meeting is called to order. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Here.
Dr. Estra,
Here.
Mr. O'Neill,
Here.
Mr. Rue,
Here.
Mr. Copeland.
Here. Please join me in the invocation. Our God, we're grateful to have the opportunity to gather to make decisions for the people of Springfield. Help us to make them well and help us to continue to try to reach out to them in this difficult time. In your name we pray. Amen. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
justice for all.
Okay, do you want to approve the minutes now?
Mayor Copeland, can we just do the work session first?
That's what I was asking. That's
Thank
the answer. Okay, let's do the work session.
Yes, so thank you, Commission. We do have one work session item for today's meeting, and that is with the Clark County Solid Waste District. So with us today are Chuck Bauer and Bonnie Martins, and they're going to be presenting the Solid Waste District's annual report. Chuck and Bonnie?
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, great. I understand that you'll be running our presentation for us, so thank you for doing that. I'll wait for it to come up. So this is our annual report from last year. We usually come earlier in the year to present this to the city, but thank you for having us today. So next slide, we'll give a quick overview of kind of what we're up to today. So we'll give you a quick background on the Solid Waste District, talk about environmental enforcement work that the district's done, talk about some of our programs, specialty recycling, our drop-off stations, education work we've done within the district, community engagement, and then I'll kind of go over kind of some numbers, how we did in 2019. And Bonnie Martins and I will kind of switch back and forth during the presentation. And then, of course, we'll be here for questions at the end of the presentation. And, of course, if anyone has questions as we go along, I'll try to slow down and allow for time for folks to interrupt me. So next slide kind of gives a quick rundown about what our solid waste district is and what our mission is. We are a county agency. Our mission is to ensure that Clark County residents and businesses have access to comprehensive solid waste services. We provide education and assistance to support our community and waste reduction programs and services. We have a small staff. We have 3 full-time staff, and you can kind of see the list there. So Bonnie Martins is our program manager. We have a program specialist, Sam Perrin, who does a lot of the education work. And then we have a recycling facility manager, John Hoy, who's been with us for quite a long time. We also have some part-time staff. I'm part-time as a director of the Solid Waste District. We have some. I also have an office assistant and recycling operation workers that work a few days a week. And we also have 2 contracts. We contract with the sheriff's office in Clark County to provide 2 deputies to help with environmental enforcement work, and we have a contract with the combined health district for the same types of services. So next slide, please. This is an overview of the work that the health district provides to the district in relation to the contract we have with them. So they do a number of things within the district. They inspect trash trucks. You can see the numbers. I won't kind of go over everything, but in 2019 they looked at over 181 trash vehicles. They inspect composting facilities, salvage yards. We have 2 construction and demolition debris landfills in the district. They do inspections for those. Scrap tire dealers. They also take complaints related to issues with dealing with solid waste within the district and perform inspections. They issue warning letters, and they also will issue board orders for cleanups of properties. Next slide, please. So I mentioned also that we have a contract with the Sheriff's Office. We have 2 environmental enforcement officers. Those are Officers Bennett and Tillman that are in the picture there. They've been working with the district for a number of years. We, as a district, take in complaint calls for illegal dumping within the county. You can see that in 2019 we had almost 400 calls come in. Those calls go to these deputies, and they will investigate those calls, and they also will help clean up illegal dump sites that are within public right-of-way. So they do that type of work, and they also make arrests related to the work that they're doing. They use Pride inmates and run the program for us with Pride inmates. Could you go to the next slide, please? I think that's maybe we talk about. Yeah, the Pride program. So the Pride program allows inmates to come out of the jail and provide services back to the community. So one of the services that they do is they work with those deputies and help clean up illegal dump sites. We also use them to in our facility here at 1602 West Main Street to bale cardboard. So you can see in 2019 they almost did 10,000 hours of service within the district, and picked up a lot of trash. They also baled a lot of cardboard for us. So that contract with the Sheriff's Office allows for that Pride program to exist within the district. So next slide. I think I'm going to turn over to Bonnie at this point, and I'll come back towards the end of the presentation and kind of talk about some of the district numbers. So Bonnie, if you're there, I'll let you kind of take off from here.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so each week on Thursdays, as you can see on the upper right, and the first Saturday of each month, we offer a service that allows county residents to bring in items that aren't normally accepted at their curbside trash service. So things like televisions and electronics, we brought in 71 tons of those. Also, liquid paint and household hazardous waste. We have the 28 tons of paint and 7.2 of the household hazardous waste. And last year, we saw just over 2,800 customers come through those specialty recycling days. And that's paying customers, because we do accept some free items like batteries and cooking oil, and those numbers aren't included in there. So we actually see a few more than that even. Okay, next slide. So new last year in 2019, we had applied for a grant through the Ohio EPA to purchase a styrofoam recycling machine. We're only one of 2 in the state of Ohio that's currently recycling this packaging foam. If it's bendable or like styrofoam carry-out food containers and styrofoam cups, those are not acceptable items. It's just that packaging material on fragile items, electronics, furniture, etc. And when you look at the photo in the bottom right, of course, what goes in is the items that you see, and in the very bottom right, it kind of melts it, and it comes out in a snaky-like tube, and then we form bricks of those, and they go on a pallet. And we've been doing this program since late November of 2019, and it's going quite well for us, actually. So go ahead.
Great.
Oh, yeah, there we go. As Chuck said earlier, Sam Perrin is our education person and relatively new with the district. In just 3 skits, we had 477 kids attend those 3 programs. And in a classroom programs, we've had 69 classroom programs with 1,300 kids getting programs about recycling, litter prevention, services, environmental causes as well. So he's really made an impact at the school level of education. And then when you go to the next slide, we not only do the school programming, we also do some community work. Each spring, we generally have the Great American Cleanup, and we had 1,100 volunteers in 2019 help with that Great American Cleanup. In the upper right, you see one of the groups and the bags that they picked up from their 1 to 2 hour cleanup. We also have a community cleanup trailer that organizations, anywhere from 5 adults and larger, can clean up a neighborhood, a church property, et cetera, anywhere in the county. And we had 10 groups use that community trailer last year. Also exciting for us through Keep America Beautiful, we had one state level award given to us for a tomato fundraising project for Keep Clark County Beautiful. And in that bottom right photo with the group in front of the sunflower mural between Grand and Euclid, we won a national Keep America Beautiful award for that with our coordination of the different groups that helped with that project there. Next slide. Also in the community, we reach out. We did some programs with National Trails, Master Gardeners, et cetera. Church groups and families, et cetera, can borrow these Clearstream frames that we have that allows the groups to both have trash and recycling components. And then they can bring the Clearstream recycling to one of those 6 drop-off locations throughout the county. And we had 22 groups borrow the Clearstreams. You've seen those at the Summer Arts Festival as well. Chuck?
Thanks, Bonnie. So I'm going to go through a few slides with just numbers related to how the district did in 2019. We have and operate 6 drop-off recycling stations within the county, and you can see the list of where they're located. Our main locations on West Main Street. We have one in Home Road in the city of Springfield, and then we have some that are outside of the city limits in Northridge, Mad River Township. One out near South Vienna, and one is our newest locations in Pitchen in Green Township. So each of those stations have green Rumpke recycling dumpsters, and in 2019 we emptied almost 2,000 dumpsters of mixed recyclables. So on the right-hand side of that slide, that equated to a little over 600 tons of mixed recyclables that were picked up. And we also picked up about 300 tons of cardboard in a cardboard-only bins that are located at those sites. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, the district's goal is to fulfill the state's solid waste plan. And the state's goal for residential and commercial recycling is to have a recycling rate of greater than 25%. So for 2018, which is the number we use for 2019, it's a kind of a year behind in reporting. Our district had a number of 41%, which is greater than that 25%. We're happy about that number, and that equated to about 66,000 tons of materials that were recycled and were diverted from landfills as far as the commercial and residential recycling. So that was really nice. Next slide, please. So we talked about our drop-off facilities that we run. This slide kind of gives an idea of what types of material and numbers that are coming out of those sites. So the first section on the left is tons of paper. We are trying to track the paper recycling bins that are located within the county. They're a free service that are provided, so our numbers in reporting back can be kind of vary from year to year. But you can see that we're kind of down in 2019 from previous years. Partly, we think that's just kind of it's hard for us to get accurate numbers from them. So the middle section is tons of mixed recyclables that are coming through the sites that we have control over. You can see that 614 tons in 2019. We're seeing an increased use of those year after year, which is something that's good. We think that it's being well used. The sites are being well used. And the tonnage of paper is on the right-hand side. You can see we're seeing that go up along with the increased use of the drop-off facilities. Next slide, please. As far as non-generation fees, so the district is supported by a generation fee that's based on every ton of solid waste that is disposed of from the county. We also have non-generation fees that come in, and these are user fees and recycling income. So this just gives a history of kind of how those fees come into the district's And in 2019, you can see that the blue section of a little over $50,000 of user fees, that's the money that's being generated largely from the specialty recycling a program that Bonnie was mentioning. So you can see that that program is continuing to grow year after year. And last year we really had a big jump in the use of that program. The bottom, the green section is recycling income. So that's where we sell cardboard that we bale and also scrap metal that people may donate to the district. You can see that number is down from the previous year, but actually we recycled more cardboard in 2019 than we did 2018. It's a commodity that we're selling, and the commodity prices in 2019 actually dropped significantly. So that's why that income is down. So next slide, please. This is the last slide pretty much for the presentation. So this is kind of just a summary of the overall fund balances for the district and kind of what our revenue and expenses look like in 2019. The bottom section is highlighted in green for 2019. The district brought in a little over $940,000. Our annual expenses, $837,000. So our end of year fund balance was just over $1 million for the solid waste district. And I think that's our last slide, maybe one more. Yeah, I think that's the last one. So I don't know if there's any questions.
I did have one on the environmental cleanup. During the pandemic, I was told that they had curtailed that for a period of time. Is that back in operation now?
It is back in operation. So for approximately 3 months, we did not have access to our Pride inmates. So the inmates were, were not allowed out of the jail. And actually, the inmates that are involved in the Pride group are fairly low risk, and it's those inmates really were not in the jails during that period of time. So that's come back now. At that point in time, for those 3 months, we still took calls for illegal dumping, and our office reached back out to the political subdivision wherever that call came in. So if it was City of Springfield, we'd reach out to the city, or if it was a township, we'd reach out to the township folks and let them know that there was a dumping that happened in the location, and we worked with them to let them know, and they were using their own crews to pick up the illegal dumping site instead of the Pride crew coming out. But that's back in right now. It's back to the way it was before the pandemic started. So.
Well, I've just noticed an increase in regards to some of the dumping that is still laying around in the alleys and on vacant lots and things like that. I just wondered if you guys have followed up to see if do these people that called them in before need to call you back, even if the city didn't do it or the townships didn't do it?
Well, that would be my suggestion. So if if there's still something there that hasn't been picked up, it's in public right of way, and I would have them call back and follow back up.
If I may,
Right away, when private lots are dumped on, we don't go out and take care of those also?
Not private property, no.
Okay, thank you.
and if I may just interject quickly, the paper reports were still generated, as well as the maps, the GIS maps. And when the deputies were back with a Pride crew, and even just slightly before, they actually did go out and look at all the calls that came in and either checked them off to say the city handled it, or a township, whatever item was gone, or that it was then on private property. And even if the pandemic doesn't happen, as Chuck said.
Okay.
They don't.
I just have a basic question. I want to remind our citizens that this is a county agency, but City of Springfield is included in that. And
Right.
my question is, what is the phone number for citizens to call in for the trash and illegal dumping?
So the easy number to remember is 32 trash. If they dial that number, 937-32 trash, but the actual number itself is 328-7274.
Thank you, Bonnie.
I'd just like to say, Bonnie and Chuck, we really appreciate your work. And it looks like we're making some progress, but obviously we've got a long way to go. As Commissioner O'Neill points out, we still have considerable illegal dumping in our community, unfortunately, not only on public property, but private property. And we need to continue to work on that. We need to work very hard to clean up our community and address this litter issue that seems to continue to grow in Springfield.
Okay. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very helpful.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so Jill, is it okay if I ask for approval of minutes now?
Let's adjourn this meeting and then we'll take another
Okay,
roll call.
their motion to adjourn the hearing.
So moved.
Second,
Been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
yes.
Dr. Estrab,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Now can we move to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
Yes.
Estrip, so moved.
Second.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estrab,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Okay. Proceed with first readings by title only.
Amending ordinance number 9190 passed March 12, 1991, and commonly known as the codified ordinances of the city of Springfield, Ohio, by repealing and replacing existing chapter 170 titled Police Community Relations Advisory Group with new chapter 170 titled Community Police Advisory Team. Authorizing the acceptance of a 2020-2021 drug use prevention grant in an amount up to $38,732.40 from the Ohio Attorney General's Office to be used for funding for 4 officers to teach drug use prevention education in public schools, and authorizing the city manager, finance director, chief of police to perform all acts and execute all documents they consider necessary to fulfill the city's obligations under said grant and to comply with all relevant local, state, and federal legal requirements. Authorizing the city manager to enter into a Shelter Plus Care One grant agreement with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development in an amount not to exceed $185,891. Authorizing the city manager and director of finance to perform all acts and execute all documents they consider necessary to fulfill the city's obligations under said grant agreement and to comply with all relevant local, state, and federal legal requirements, and authorizing the city manager to enter into a subrecipient funding agreement, Shelter Plus Care One Tenant-Based Assistance 2020-2021, between the city and Springfield Metropolitan Housing Authority to conduct a Shelter Plus Care One funded tenant-based rental assistance and administration program in an amount not to exceed $169,440. Authorizing the exercise of the city's option to renew the contract with JCI Jones Chemicals Incorporated for the purchase of liquid chlorine for use by the city's water treatment plant in an amount not to exceed $35,000.
Okay, as I have commented and it's appeared in the newspaper, creating the Community Police Advisory Team, I think is something that the city needs to do. It's partially a response to what's been going on in the country, but it's also something that I think we simply should have done anyway. And in fact, we had a group to do similar things a decade ago that sort of died. And so we're sort of reviving that in a somewhat different form with similar responsibilities. So this would provide a community group that could examine issues that arise in the community about police activity and offer their judgment as to whether it was handled appropriately or not, and what might be done if there are additional things that should be done.
Thank you, Mayor. Well said. if people are interested in serving on this new advisory team, assuming we approve the legislation at the next meeting, what do they need to do? Who do they need to contact?
Yes, Commissioner. So we are actually working on revising the normal boards of commission application right now to be specific for the Community Police Advisory Team. That application should be ready in 2 weeks when you would vote on this item. And then obviously, if you approve it, it becomes effective 2 weeks later, and we would have that application ready for individuals that were interested in applying. They would apply utilizing that application and directly through the city clerk, who then would provide those applications to commission to review.
Will that application, Mr. Heck, be online?
Yes, we will make it available online.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Warren, what's the number of participants in this on this committee?
Ryan?
Yeah, it would be 9 members. So the original PCRAG was 7 or slated for 7 members, and we did increase it to 9.
Could you back up for a minute, City Manager Heck, and tell people what some of the things that we're looking for as far as serving on this board?
Yeah, so certainly one of the requirements is to be a resident or elector of the city. So you do have to be a resident of the city of Springfield, which is common with all of our boards. There's an opportunity if somebody brings a certain professional expertise that the commission would feel is valuable to the board itself. The commission obviously could waive that requirement of being a resident of the city, but we're looking for residents of the community and individuals that can bring some expertise and the ability to thoroughly review, recommend policies, procedures alongside of our police division. And so Lee and Allison Elliott have been very involved in this process as we've worked to kind of reshape and recraft this Community Police Advisory Team. And this group is an opportunity to form that bridge, that continued bridge between our community and our police division, in the sense that they can be there right alongside reviewing whether it be types of equipment that are used, policy recommendations or changes. And so bringing somewhat of a knowledge and understanding of the community, but also from the law enforcement side will be important. And, you know, the members of this board should be ready for an education as well, because there will be a lot of learning. We talk about our policy manual. Policies and procedures manual of the police division is 800 pages long. And so we want them to have a thorough understanding of those policies and procedures, because they will be reviewing and helping make recommendations for potential changes of those. So there's going to be an education component. One of those things that we've looked at is members will be required within their first 2 years of service to go through the Citizens Police Academy. We believe the Citizens Police Academy, that's run now for almost 20 years, is a great tool to learn kind of the inside of the police division and their policies, procedures, and how they operate. And so that is something we felt was very important. So you can have already attended, obviously, through the Citizens Police Academy, but it is something we will ask members to go through in their first 2 years of appointment if they're appointed by the city commission. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Commissioner Chilton.
Yes, that does. I just want our citizens to know that, you know, this is part of a second part to all the things that's going on in our country today. And the Police Citizens Academy is great. I have been through it, and it is an eye opener. So we're hoping that our citizens take interest and apply. You know, you need the protesting and it brings awareness, but this is the second part of it, the second piece, and you need both. So thank you, Brian.
I completely agree with Commissioner Chilton. I think this is an appropriate thing for every city to look at across the country in response to, the various ways in which people in the United States have questioned police activity. We need somebody who's a part of the community to take a look, not only at all those procedures, but also look at specific incidents if there's some question.
I agree with, first of all, this committee will be fine. It's an extension of what we currently have. But the big thing is this should in no way shadow how our police do their job, because in our community, we are so blessed to have the police department and the leadership that we have, not just police department either, public safety all around. And to be proactive to do this is a good idea. I agree with it 100%. However, it should not be construed that this should cast any doubt on the way that we handle things currently, because I think that they've done a wonderful job, not just since March the 14th, since they've been there, since we've dealt with things over the years and handled them, maybe not as proactive as we should have, but we have produced some good results. So again, I just want to make sure the police department understands, the people that do it every day, 124, 129, whatever we have, that this is no shadow over their ability and what they've done. Thank you.
And I'm gonna change the subject for a minute, but I want to ask Shannon to comment on the Shelter Plus Care One grant. Who can receive it and how does this work in conjunction with Springfield Metropolitan Housing Authority?
Yes, I'm working to get her called up now. I think, there we go.
There we go. I'm working off of my phone today in the office. So Shelter Plus Care is federal funding received from HUD to assist with the transition of families and individuals from emergency shelter to permanent housing. So we have a partnership contract with Springfield Metropolitan Housing, and that funding is used to help pay for the vouchers for those families and individuals that are then transitioning from the emergency shelter system into their new permanent housing.
Thank you, Shannon. So can it be anybody, or is it specific that you have to be like a certain age or a veteran or something?
So those who are receiving services from either a domestic violence shelter and or something like IHN here in the city of Springfield will be looked at to see if they meet the qualifications to receive the Shelter Plus Care funding. Priority is given to those who are disabled, handicapped, of veteran status, but we also work among various different classifications of individuals. So there's families and individuals, and really our community development team, particularly the development programs division, work very hard to try to make sure that they match that funding up to provide the best assistance possible to get people to permanent housing.
Thank you.
Anything else on first readings? Clerk, proceed with second readings.
Mayor Copeland, I did receive one email on a first reading item.
Okay.
This would be for the first item regarding amending the ordinance for the new Community Police Advisory Team. I received an email to the commissioners from Casey Patrick O'Brien, who resides at 1731 Trinity Drive in Springfield. He states that he is a 2013 graduate of Wittenberg University. My question is this: will this police advisory board with its 9 members be representative of the Springfield community, or since, as Mayor Copeland said, this is being revived to address issues from the domestic terrorist group Black Lives Matter, will this 9-member panel be filled disproportionately with Blacks and perhaps 2 or 3 Antifa sympathizing and self-loathing white liberals, all acting with clear and divisive political agenda, as opposed to the best interest of this community? Thank you, Casey O'Brien.
Well, I think it's our intention to choose people so that all sectors of the community are represented. Okay, Now will clerk proceed with second readings?
Yes, sir. Confirming purchases and the obtaining of services for the city and providing for payments therefore and declaring an emergency therein. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Sorry about that. Let me go back. Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with the Chemical Services Incorporated for the purchase of liquid ferric sulfate 60% for a period of 1 year with an option to renew for 2 additional 1-year periods for an amount not to exceed $144,450.
Move to adopt.
Estrop seconds.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission? Clerk will call a roll.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Now clerk will proceed with emergency ordinance.
Sorry about that.
That's right. You have to feel better.
Confirming purchases and the obtaining of services for the city and providing for payments therefore and declaring an emergency therein.
Estrop moves.
Second.
Second.
Rue seconded first.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Yes, there was one item on there for how Edison I thought was quite pricey, and I was hoping that our treasurer could explain that.
All right, there we go. I'm unmuted now. Those are for telephone poles that get knocked down and where we cannot find somebody that has insurance for that, and Ohio Edison bills us for those. And unfortunately, those were from a previous year. I don't have the detail in front of that, but I'd be happy to look into that and get you that information, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum principal amount of $500,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of reconstructing Gateway Boulevard and providing for all related site improvements, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency therein.
Estrop moves.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
Could somebody bring us up to current speed of what our responsibilities are out at Prime, Ohio? As far as what we do and what the county does?
Yes, I can speak to that, Commissioner. So one of the things that we are responsible for is the repaving of Gateway Boulevard. That falls under our responsibilities. The township, who receives 5% of the income tax in Prime Ohio 1 or from Prime Ohio 1 businesses, is responsible for minor maintenance, ditch maintenance, sign replacement, sign maintenance, those types of things. But when it comes to the actual repaving, reconstruction, we are responsible as a part of the agreement for that activity.
Okay.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Authorizing the construction of 2 covered storage facilities from ClearSpan for an amount not to exceed $82,257.89 through Sourcewell pursuant to the Sourcewell Contract Purchasing Cooperative Program in accordance with the provisions of Section 9.48 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency therein.
Estrop moves.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? Mr. Estrop.
I was wondering if you could explain what these facilities will be used for.
Yes, I've called Chris Moore up and he can talk to this.
Yes, Commissioners. So these two facilities will be at the City Service Center. One of them will be used to store salt. Currently, the salt that doesn't fit in our barn, we store in a corral with a gigantic tarp over it. And that is, the tarp gets ruined about every year due to weather. And it also makes it very difficult to access when we need it. The second storage facility will be used to store sand and gravel to backfill primarily water main breaks when they happen in the winter. What happens is we install frozen gravel back in the holes, and because we do that, the holes settle and we have to dig it back out. So that one will have a little bit of heat involved with it to keep the gravel thawed out. So when we backfill in the winter, we don't have road issues.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Estrom,
Yes,
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a home ownership or rental housing loan agreement, 810 Clifton Avenue, 2020, with Neighborhood Housing Partnership of Greater Springfield Incorporated for the redevelopment of 810 Clifton Avenue property and declaring an emergency therein.
so moved, Estrop.
Second,
Been moved and seconded. Questions or comments from the commission?
can Shannon help us with that a little bit with how much money we're talking? And it's two different things, a rental or a ownership.
Sure. So this is intended to be an home ownership construction project, but because of the way that HUD regulations are currently revised and written, it does require us to indicate that it could also be used for rental should the property never be sold as home ownership. That's a requirement we have to put in there. So this is going to be a new construction homeowner project. The budget is currently $199,544. And that is coming from our home loan program as well as Neighborhood Housing Partnership funds. The intent here is to partner with JVS as much as practical. I'm sorry, it's not JVS anymore, CTC, as much as practical during COVID. This was a project that was put on hold earlier this year because of COVID, but we do need to put a contract in place so that we can continue with this construction. Our intent and hope among the partnerships is that we can not only build a new home on Clifton Avenue for home ownership, but that we can also have this as an educational partnership with students who are learning the construction trades, because that is critical for us in our community. If they are not able to continue the construction as they were earlier in the spring, there is funding put into this so that we can utilize other contractors as well, so that we don't delay the construction.
How does this program here financially line up with what OIC does over in the west sector?
This is a very similar partnership. And OIC also is looking at another homeownership construction, and our team is working with them as well.
Okay. I want to thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Estrop?
I just wanted to make 2 points. One, I'm pleased that we continue to focus on redeveloping Clifton Avenue. Some of the homes that have gone up there are really a significant addition to that whole area. So I'm pleased with that. And secondly, as Commissioner O'Neill mentioned, I'm very pleased that in the case of CTC and OIC, we're continuing to use our education system to help develop skills that are badly needed in this community, and also will serve these young people very well in their future. So I think this is an excellent program, and I'm pleased to support it.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Dr. Estrom,
Yes,
Mr. Copeland.
Yes.
Confirming and approving change order number 1 to the contract between the city and Strasser Construction Incorporated For the Trail Maintenance Phase 2 project, PID number 109480, to increase the contract in an amount not to exceed $22,403.48 for a total amount not to exceed $194,348.08, and authorizing the city manager to execute said change order number 1 and declaring an emergency therein.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Go ahead.
Okay. Chilton and Rue,
Thank you.
comments? Mr. Estrop.
I was wondering if Mr. Heck or someone could explain why we're adding 22,000 to the project.
Yes, I've asked or pulled up Chris Moore and he can address that issue.
Yes, Commissioners, the majority of this change order, $19,000 of it, is extra surface material on the bike path. And that is attributed to the fact that when the project was estimated, it was done from record drawings and aerial drawings. And then out in the field, there were sections of the bike path that were 6 inches to a foot wider than estimated. So this accounts for the extra material that had to be placed to cover the entire surface of the bike path.
Very good. Thank you.
Is
I
it grant
know
money?
The people who ride the bike path or walk it are very pleased with our improvement of it. And, it was a job that we needed to do, and I'm pleased that we were able to get it done.
Mhm.
So
Chris,
just,
I'm sorry, I didn't even mean to interrupt Dr. Estrop. Is it grant money? Or is it?
17,900 of the money comes from the Ohio Department of Transportation. 4,480 comes from RPI funds.
Okay, thank you.
does this complete the project?
Yes, this should be the final change order right now.
Thank you.
Having said that, maintaining the trails is an endless process, right?
Correct.
Well, I hope it doesn't take as long this time as it has over the number of years to get some money from the state to do it.
Anyone else? Clerk will call the roll.
Dr. Estrop,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes,
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland,
Yes. We do not have any add-ons, correct?
correct?
Are there questions or comments from commissioners?
I have, go ahead.
I
No,
was
go ahead.
going
You-
to ask
you were
my
up first.
usual
Go
2
ahead.
questions.
Sorry.
Oh, yours typical too. Well, they can wait for just a second.
Okay.
Kevin.
The reason that I wanted to comment today is I was late getting here last week because of a doctor's appointment for my wife, and I apologize for that. There was a change in the meeting time that we kind of missed, almost missed today too, but I'll catch up with how we're doing things at some point. I think the public needs to know, being it was a 4-0 vote last week with regards to the dispatch center, how Kevin O'Neill would have voted, being that I'm an elected city commissioner. And I would have definitely voted no, so the vote would have been 4-1. And I want to give you some of the reasons why that I would have voted no, because I had given them last week too. First of all, I have made some contacts with our police chief and also a union representative and whatnot to get their input, because I think it's going to take an awful lot of input if this ever comes to fruition, if it's ever going to work. The biggest hiccup or the biggest obstacle that I see coming down the road is the very same reason that the negotiations fell apart several years ago. And it's not a full partnership. I think that Commissioner Lonis made it very clear in the paper that this is not a consolidation. This is not anything like that. He said, quote, "That ship has sailed." That was his quote, not mine. So I would have to perceive that they're anticipating, and he did say this also in the article, that we are going to be customers of the county, of the dispatch. That presents some major problems to me. The biggest one is everybody knows that in any new project that you take on, in any new organization, you're going to have disputes, you're going to have hiccups. We aren't even into the negotiations yet, other than with the police union, the sheriff's union that we have nothing to do with. But at the end of the day, without being a partnership, you know, we're in a situation to where I feel the city is at a disadvantage with regards to any kind of negotiation because we have no say, none. This advisory group is just that, very similar to what we talked about this morning with regards to the police advisory group. They have an opinion. We listen to the opinion and we move on. That's the same situation with this. I do believe, or I wouldn't have worked on it for 10 years, that a combined dispatch could very well work and maybe save money, but the figures that were given are not correct and they're not accurate. It's not $250,000 and it probably isn't even going to be $200,000 because of the cost of things. $200,000 was the number when it was out there 8 years ago. So, but money to me at this juncture with this particular program is not important. What's important to me is that the services are either equal to or better than what our citizens are used to and become accustomed to, and not to mention our police and firemen who put their lives on the line based on some of these decisions and where they're dispatched and what they're dispatched into and whatnot. And if we would talk to them, I think that you would find that there's some serious concern. Again, I'm not sure that it wouldn't work, but I know what won't work. If it's not a partnership, it's destined to fail. And for some reason, the county doesn't want that. Remember this, they walked away from the table when it was going to be a partnership because they didn't want a council of governments is what I was told, which I know is true. You do want to say something, Brian? Go ahead.
I actually do. So, Commissioner, what you're saying, don't interrupt me.
Wait, one at a
What you're
time.
saying, Kevin, is that Brian's numbers that he's come up with are inaccurate and false because you just said that. Secondly, if you go through Snyder Park, they've put a new fountain in, Kevin. The waters are no longer stagnant in that area. We continue to make decisions based on your information and how you're doing things. We will have stagnant waters and no growth in this community, which there's evidence of that throughout the years. What you're saying is, I'm not willing to make decisions based on.
Mr. Mayor, he's
Wait, no. He's talking. He didn't interrupt you.
There's been good information put together, good information. There's been lots of effort done. This is far closer than it ever has been. There has been concessions made on both sides. Mr. Commissioner Lonis in the county is one voice out of 3, just like I'm one voice out of 5, just like you're one voice out of 5. So these are things to pay attention of. I will not let my decision be based on one person's opinion and his stake. He doesn't have 3. Okay, so I'm just saying you're expressing your opinion. I'm expressing mine. But the very reason I run is for the very reason you're talking about right now, Kevin, is because if we make no decision if we make a decision because we're afraid to take a risk, after we've worked very hard to get this point, we're not going anywhere. So I take exception to what you're saying because Brian Heck, our city manager, has put a lot of good information together, Kevin, and worked very hard and has some accurate numbers that are not false. And I think there is concerns, and this is not over. But we are at the step where we can get the information. If we get to a place where we can't go any farther, then that's the way it'll be. But to say what you're saying now is saying I'm not interested in saving money, and I don't think this will work. I mean, I heard you say it may work, but I just take exception to some of your comments because I know Brian Heck's worked very hard in getting the right information to all of us.
May I continue, Mayor?
Yes, you may.
I take exception to your comments interrupting my presentation, Mr. Rue. Mark, can you please just shed some light on this money that you and I have talked about several times, that you don't know where the $250,000 came from? It was in the paper?
Sure, Commissioner, I'd be happy to. What I have not seen yet is a final numbers for both our budget for the upcoming year and for what the proposed savings would be. I believe that the proposal is based on the number of calls, and that that number is varying now. I think our calls are down. So I'm not sure I can put an exact number to that savings at this point in time. We need to explore that a little bit further. So
When you and I talked about this, Mark, did you tell me you don't know where that number came from?
I did not know where that number came from at that particular time. We had done some preliminary, it's been a while now, but we did some preliminary looks at what the savings numbers could potentially be. As I sit here today, I'm not exactly sure that where the $250,000 number comes from, but based on what Brian has told me, I believe it could the savings could potentially run higher based on what our 2020 budget is. So again, this has to be further vetted and further refined, and I'm not prepared to come up with a definitive number right at this point in time.
Mr. O'Neill.
Right. Just so you know, Mr. Rue, I didn't fabricate numbers. I talked to our director of finance, who is our appointment, and to Brian Heck. So for you, I'm pulling numbers out of the air or that I'm making comments that aren't true, that's not so. I've done a lot of legwork, not on this particular one, but I was involved in this, and so was the mayor, that I'll get to in a second. We had an agreement, and the problem that happened was, whether you like it or not, one commissioner from the county nooched it. I'm sorry that happened, and it's the same one that's pushing the envelope now because they need the customers in order to make their facility work. I'm in favor of continuing down the road with combined dispatch as a partnership, because I, apparently unlike you, will not sell the citizens of Springfield down the road and not know what the hell we're going to do when it fails.
Could we not question the integrity of the other person either way?
I'm answering his comment, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, but you were
tear me apart, and I'm going to answer whether you like it or not.
I'm just trying to run the meeting. Let's not insult each other. Okay?
And
Are there others?
did you ask him not to do that?
Yeah.
Fair.
I just asked all of us not to do it.
Mayor Copeland, I would like to make a comment. Commissioner O'Neill, I'm sorry that you were not able to attend 2 weeks ago, but my comments were that this is similar to a baseball game. In fact, that we approved the memorandum of understanding, just like when you hit the ball and you go to first base. In order to score a home run, you have to hit every single base. So this is just the beginning, and we all, the four of us that was here, voted for this for our various reasons. And I'm grateful for our city manager for getting the information. And I hope in the future that we can all agree on the second base.
Okay, so
Correct you, Mrs. Chilton. I was here. I just wasn't here prior to your vote.
Okay, thank you.
I stand somewhere between folks there. That is, I voted to continue, but this is the first of 3 steps. And I made clear in my vote that I am not committing to the second and third step, which is basically what Commissioner Chilton is saying too. I have many of the same concerns that Mr. O'Neill has. Let's see what happens. And some other things have to happen before we get to where it would make sense to me. But in the meantime, we needed to take the first step, and that's all I voted for. I did not vote for the second and third steps, which is, I think, where Commissioner Chilton is too. Others want to speak to this, or should we move on?
Can we move on? I just had a comment regarding Columbia Gas. I believe they sent all of us commissioners an email. I believe disconnections are starting back up like in September. I don't remember the exact date, but if our citizens are having problems, they really need to call Columbia Gas to make arrangements of some kind of payment program. And the number is 1-800-344-4077. Please don't allow your gas to get turned off for lack of communication. Call Columbia Gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Estrop, you have the same questions to ask, right?
Same two questions. Mr. Heck, how are we doing in terms of providing service and in terms of staffing? And Mr. Bechtel, how are we doing in terms of our overall financial position?
Yes, Commissioner. So from a staffing perspective, we do have a few individuals that are on quarantine due to exposure currently. But we're able to maintain operations at the full service capacity with that, even with those numbers we currently see. So from a level of service, we are providing the same level of service that our citizens have come to know and expect from our organization. So we are lucky that we've been able to manage through, and we have minimal quarantines relative to either positive cases or due to exposure. So that's a positive for the organization. From a public safety perspective, I do want to say a couple things. One, we had a graduation of 8 new recruits last Friday, which brings our numbers back up to the full staffing at 127, which is great. And then we also swore in 5 new police officers, 2 of which are lateral candidates, and they can begin the in-house training process immediately. And 3 others actually began, I believe, yesterday in the Clark State Police Academy. And so they will be at the academy for much of the rest of 2020. And we look forward to bringing them in-house for training in early 2021. With that said, we are currently posting the position of police officer as well. The application deadline runs from last week through August 28th. So we're asking individuals that have an interest in a career in public service and serving our community to consider applying. If you know someone that's interested in applying, we encourage you to encourage them to look into applying and take the test. This is a civil service test. That process will begin September 12th. We will do it in different waves due to the COVID restrictions of no more than 10. And so we will have as many testing sessions as needed to be able to test everyone who applies. If anybody's interested, they can go to our website, www.springfieldohio.gov, and click on the employment tab. And that would provide them the application materials needed to apply to become a police officer with the city of Springfield. I want to touch on one comment on the Community Police Advisory team that Commissioner O'Neill had made. I do believe we are in a great position as a community because of the community policing model that's been adopted and has been in place for many years. Our very chief, Lee Graff, was behind a lot of those efforts early in his career. And I think those efforts have made a huge difference in the way that we engage with the community and the relationships that we have between the police division and our community. And so I think that the addition of the Community Police Advisory Team builds upon the engagement and the relationship that we already have within our community. And I commend the men and women of our police division for the efforts that they make on a day-to-day basis in working with the community, oftentimes one-on-one, to make improvements to the way that we work and engage in our community. And so I appreciate the leadership that they employ every day throughout Springfield. And I believe that this will just be a continued building block upon what already is great happening within our police division and our community.
Okay, Mark, where are we financially?
Actually, Commissioner and Mayor, I'm happy to report that we're still doing well from a cash standpoint. Our general fund has unencumbered cash of about $14.3 million as of yesterday. Our total cash is at $72 million. I'd also like to point out that through the end of July, we're running a slight surplus, $101,000. As you might recall from our budgeting process, because of the 27 payrolls this year, we had expected a deficit. So I'm very happy with where we're at. From an income tax perspective, We are now running year to date down about 4% from where we were the previous year, which is, you know, I had previously reported to you that we were down about 10%. So July, when we had our income tax, you know, we moved the date from April 15th to July 15th. And the amount of money that we received in July was more than I had anticipated. So we're actually doing very well. I think that speaks to some of the diversity of our economic base here, from you know, auto to government to healthcare, are some of our larger employers, and that diversity has helped carry us through this difficult period.
That's
obviously
very good news. Very good news.
Yes, I'm still want to be cautiously optimistic at this point, because I think there's still many unknowns as far as where we're going with the pandemic at this point, but we've weathered this first part of the storm, so to speak, very well.
Anything else?
Commissioner Chilton, Dr. Estrop, you have a question?
I was just going to say, keep up the good work. I know it's a balancing act, trying to look at keeping expenditures under control and hoping for the best on revenue. And it seems like everyone on the staff is doing a great job of doing that. Obviously the citizens of this community, as well as the commission, should be very appreciative of the hard work involved in doing that. I was wondering also, and I know perhaps someone else had a question on this, but when we get a second, I was wondering, Brian, if you and/or Logan could comment on the online meeting you had about the Southside development. But I didn't know if somebody else wanted to chime in on this financial and service report. It's great to hear our service continues to be at a high level, and that, as the mayor pointed out, we're doing extraordinarily well in terms of loss of revenue compared to most of our counter communities, our similar communities rather, across the state.
Okay, is everyone okay with talking about the South Side stuff?
Yes.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, so I'll just give a quick overview. So we did hold 7 meetings with various organizations and stakeholders with our partner in the project, Larry Dillon and his company. And with that, Logan, I just want to commend Logan and Tom for really being the organizers behind that and really putting in the legwork and the effort to make those meetings happen. The meetings were a success with over 100 people participating. But with that, I'll ask Logan to share a little bit of the insight from what was gleaned from those meetings.
Thanks, Brian, and thank you, Commissioner. To Brian's point, I think the meetings were very well received. We did meet with over 100 participants, so we got quite a bit of feedback, but the overall feedback was that #1 priority should still be placing a grocer in that former Kroger site. So we talked a lot about redevelopment of that entire corridor, but something that we heard constantly was, let's still keep our #1 focus on attracting another grocer. So Dylan's idea for that sort of food hall concept was well received, and we got a lot of feedback on pulling in some local entrepreneurs and giving them an opportunity to set up in that space. But as it stands, I think Dylan is kind of compiling notes and going back to the drawing board to kind of think about what other aspects need to be added into his current renderings and his current site plan. But as it stands, we got a lot of feedback and a lot of different ideas, but that grocer and that food hall idea was a constant that was very well received.
Yeah, my information from people like me who live on the South Side was that they were very happy with what happened and hopeful about what might happen in the future.
Absolutely.
So Logan, are there September meetings planned?
No, so those 7 meetings that we hosted were the primary meetings. From each group, we asked them to select one to two individuals to make up a smaller group that Dylan would then present back to. So that meeting has yet to be scheduled, but each of those individual groups elected someone to meet with Dylan again to kind of go over the ideas that were presented at the meeting a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you.
It sounds like it was a great success, Logan. Congratulations to you and Brian. I'm pleased to hear that we had that much interest and that we were able to solicit some positive ideas to move forward. Thank you very much.
I think it really speaks to the community and their commitment to that South Limestone corridor and their passion to continue to stay involved. So it was great. Thanks.
Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, may I go backwards and address Commissioner Chilton's question to me relative to the moral obligation that that you passed?
Sure.
The reason that was such an expensive light pole to repair was that it was metal, it was embedded in concrete. And so Ohio Edison billed us for not only a lane closure with a flagger, and as well as having to cut that light pole and dig it out of the embedded concrete. So that's why that was so expensive.
Thank you. That explains it.
Anybody want to adjourn?
Mr. moves to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Chilton,
Yes.
Dr. Estra,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Mr. Copeland.
Yes. Meeting is adjourned.
Bye.
You all